educational tool areas in Nigeria, in my opinion. Although there are presently a few tech startups focused on using animation to teach students, shouldn't be. So teaching is a lot more effective when it engages multiple senses, and how to explain processes in ways that would have required the physical presence of an instructor. This is really useful in things like the medical field, like oil and gas, like construction, and so many other fields, and it's especially relevant today in a society where social distancing has become the order of the day. So banks aren't left behind. As I mentioned before, I worked in a bank, so I was privy to and pretty much involved in the day-to-day use of animation within the bank. So there've been animated videos to communicate with. The third one is as a form of entertainment. So using animation, content developers can create all kinds of entertainment content. Whatever it is you can think of, there's really no limitations. You can create it within a computer. So you can create characters that people fall in love with. On channels such as YouTube today, people are raking in millions of views, creating content and remixes of content. So this not only earns them revenue, but it also helps them build a brand from whatever content they're putting out there. So one such channel that I actually follow is called Frame Order. It's a run. It was started by a British animator, and he kind of has a dark twist to his animated content. So someone either loses a limb or dies, but it's really hilarious the way all those things happen. And he's been able to build such a huge following. He has over 3 million subscribers, and he's heading to 1 billion views on YouTube alone. That's not talking about all his other social media channels. So there's a lot of opportunities there to be able to garner a following and build, content. YouTube actually would pay you for, every 1,000 views or something like that. So there's also Simon's Cat, and a bunch of other interesting YouTube channels that focus strictly on animation. It's also really good to see that some Nigerian animation from YouTube. Presently, I believe there's a lot of opportunities in children's entertainment, as it's not an area that's really been explored a lot in Africa. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there for people to create animation that gets the attention of kids and wins that market over. Um, one such one such show I can think of now is called a show called Bino and Fino, which is produced by a producer and animator who's based in Abuja in Nigeria. And he's been able to export that content essentially and create a following both here in Nigeria and in the diaspora from Africans. Um, there's also opportunities in mainstream content. So I'm going to share my screen again. So there's also opportunities in mainstream content. Like I mentioned before, Triggerfish Animation, the South African studio that I mentioned in the beginning, is currently in production on something called Mama K's Team 4. So those are few images from pre-production. So it's a 2D animated series that's currently in production, and it's set to be released on Netflix in the not too distant future. Either it should probably be out in the next 2 years at most, I suspect. But it's currently in development by Triggerfish Animation Studios in South Africa. So it's the the content director of the originator is a lady from Zambia by the name Malenga Mulendema. So this is a lady, interestingly enough, producing animated content from Africa that will be seen by the world because it's on Netflix. There's also companies like Netflix, like Cartoon Network, sorry, who and the Digital Lab Africa. So, and also the world's largest animated film festival, which is the Annecy Film Festival in France, that have all focused on African animation in recent times. Interestingly enough, this year, 2020, was meant to be a focus on Africa. So from each year, they focus on different countries, but this year was supposed to be a focus on the continent Africa. But unfortunately, it couldn't be as big as it would be because of the coronavirus lockdowns. So as it stands, you know, a young Nigerian animator by the name Mashood Ridwan won the last Cartoon Network pitch with his series idea called Garbage Boy and Trash Can, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now. It's meant to be a story about a young Nigerian boy who just has daydreams and goes on all these adventures with his trash can. There's also a bunch of other series. You can see in the bottom right, one called Majitu and another one called Intergalactic Ice Cream. These were also selected as finalists in the Cartoon Network competition. And they're all African, original African stories by Africans from other countries other than Nigeria. So there's also opportunities for brand building and using animation as a brand building tool. Although some of the more noticeable examples that I've seen in this field might not necessarily involve a lot of animation, but they still use characters created using digital creation tools, 3D animation tools, for instance. So some individuals and companies have been able to build fictional virtual characters and position these characters as a brand and as actual social media influencers. So this opens up a whole lot of possibilities for using these brand characters to tell stories for other brands. So one that, you know, one such company rather is a company called Brud, which is a tech startup based in the US, responsible for the creation of the first computer-generated social media influencer, the Instagram character known as Michaela. So that's the Instagram handle of the character known as Michaela. You can see that she has about 2.8 million views, followers rather. And every single post is just this character. You might, if you're not very observant, you might think she's a real character, but in actual fact, this is a 3D character, but she has a huge following. It's a big deal because she appears to live in the real world and has human traits, but she's completely created within 3D software. So in 2008, she was named one of Time's most influential people on the internet, and she's created real impact in the world with things like raising money for victims of natural disaster. Michaela is just one of several, you know, such influencers owned by this company, and they're making real cash for the owners of this intellectual property. There's also Modeling Cafe, a Japanese company responsible for creating Ima. Let me see if I can go to the actual page of Ima and show you what that looks like. So this This is Ima. So this is Ima, and you can see she has well over 300,000 followers and is a totally computer generated character. Going through her Instagram handle, you might think she's real, but she's actually computer generated. So let's look at this, for instance. This is actually CGI, 3D, and this character also gets animated. And she's making real impact in the world and making real money as a digital influencer for her creators. So there's so many possibilities, so many huge possibilities with these kinds of characters and this kind of content. So yes, so yeah, there's so much that has been done and is being done in the area of computer generated models. So there's possibilities there for people who are 3D modelers and 3D animators to create such content. And with the possibilities in artificial intelligence and real-time animation these days, the possibilities are really endless. You can put these kinds of characters in real-world situations, interacting with real human beings, and you can create all kinds of scenarios. There's just so many possibilities. There's also examples of more popular characters that have been created using this same techniques to market actual products. So as far as skills are concerned, what are the skills that are required? So some of the skills that would be required to do such things, as I've mentioned before, would be storytelling. You need to develop, essentially got into animation. Because that's what animation is, based on something that exists in, as far as observation.
Williams. Now, so is it growing or have such provision that, or do you have such provision at zero gravity?
So how to use digital creation?
The volume is and all that. But can you help us in the basic steps we can take when it comes to storytelling? Do you get that?
So as far as storytelling and of the scenario,
or most of the movies we get to watch,
do so much. Traditional animators are drawing hundreds, thousands drama or pass the message across in whatever fashion you're trying to. So I think one of the things that makes comics working, I think someone even said to write, is actually Pixar. One of their pillars of, they go through years of telling a proper story. First thing would be to make sure that you have your story right, that you have the right story, write it and rewrite it and make sure that it is everything you need it to be. Obviously, always have things are usually never perfect, but when you do have that near perfect.
We have another question, but before the question comes in, how you do it?
Okay, so software companies have done in allowing people, if you're working on a big project, for instance, in our studio, one of the tool software that rivals, and it's absolutely open source and free. So those are some of the ways we go about that.
And also to learn storytelling. Yes.
Yeah, I think his name is Bruce Block on story.